Welcome, everyone, to moving from remote teaching to teaching an online class. I want to start by asking everyone to please try to leave your microphone muted during this presentation. That way, if we have anything going on, any feedback, any kind of issues with that you do not kind of interfere with any of that stuff in the background. If you have any questions, there is a chat box that you can ask questions for and get connected through that way. We have somebody that will hopefully be kind of keeping an eye on chat and either be answering those in the chat itself or will bring them up to me periodically as needed. And then I'll try to catch up with anything that doesn't get answered throughout different times. So again, I'm asking everyone, please leave your audio muted to try to mediate some of that extra kind of background noise that may be happening, that might be going on. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. So right now, what a lot of y'all have been doing, if you've been teaching a face-to-face class, you've been teaching in a remote environment. This session is here mostly to kind of talk about how remote teaching is different than teaching an online class and give you some pointers and tips for if you're looking to teach a fully online class, some suggestions and best practices on how to move forward. There's a lot of information that we will talk about that it's looking at, best teaching practices and stuff like that. So it's kind of to help you move into that process. So one things is we want to say thank you for all that you've been doing. You've been doing great. You're doing it so far. We haven't had a lot of complaints, a lot of issues from students on faculty moving into this online environment, into this remote teaching type of philosophy. And so it's been really good so far. And we want to say thank you. And we want to make sure that we take notice that you are doing a great job at what you're doing so far. And so we just want to make sure that you are aware of that. So talking about some of those kind of differences, what is the difference between remote teaching versus teaching an online course? We've had a couple of faculty like, oh, I can do this. I've been teaching, online. There are differences between what you've been doing and a fully online class. So kind of what are those differences? So in a remote teaching environment, you can quite often still have a set time and a set place that's synchronous learning environment. That's using Zoom, that's using WebEx, where you actually sit down, same time, all your students come in and you all talk through a computer interface, through technology, but you're all at a set time and place. So you're often still meeting via those web conferencing materials, conferencing tools, and content is often taught more as needed. You gauge your students, how are they doing? Do I need to spend longer on one particular subject? Can I move forward a little bit sooner in a subject? And that's kind of how the remote teaching process kind of works. We're teaching an online course. Students are expecting the content to be available 24/7. They're expecting that content, that they can interact with that content all the time. So it's not a set time and place. They're looking for the asynchronous environment where they can complete their assignments, complete their discussions, complete their pieces as they desire and not be locked down so closely to a specific set of time. We've had some students that have kind of brought this up to faculty, and you may have seen this in some of your classes, where if you set a test to have been due to be taken during your normal class period, you may have had somebody not complete it in time or not take it because they're thinking, oh, this is now an online class, so I'm going to have more time to take it. A lot of students, especially when they're taking online classes, they take online classes because they have different needs. They have a different situation. Especially right now, they may not have childcare, where in the face-to-face class, they had childcare that they could take their child to or take their siblings to. They may be taking care of their siblings right now because their parents are having to work or something. And so if they're taking the class in an online environment, now they're going to be expecting to have a little bit more flexibility to be able to do those assignments, do those tests, meet in a little bit more flexible way. And what they also kind of expect is that content is provided kind of from the beginning. That doesn't mean that every piece of material you're going to provide to your student is available at one time. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is instead of them sitting down and sitting with you for an hour to listen to a lecture video or to listen to a lecture, they're expecting all of that material to become available at one time, and they can pick and choose and kind of move throughout the content as they desire. They might want to look at the PowerPoint first, or they might want to look at a video that you have or web links that you have. And another student's going to go through that content in a different order. So in an online environment, they're expecting a little bit more information to be provided all at one time, and not quite so I'm going to sit here from this time to this time to watch a video or listen to the professor. And so they're just kind of differences in how you prepare your content often, because you want to look at how are you providing this material to your students, and how are the students then going to be interacting with it. Because again, the main thing is that online courses, students are going to expect it to be available in more of a time frame than a remote teaching environment may be expecting. So providing content. So I've kind of already kind of led to this. What kind of content are you providing your students? In a remote versus an online, quite often it's the exact same content. It's just you may have to restructure it depending on how you did things. So did you have a PowerPoint in your face-to-face class? Well, what would you provide to your students in class that are now not on this PowerPoint? So in the PowerPoint I've been talking about a lot of additional things, a lot of different points that aren't necessarily specifically on this PowerPoint. So if I were to provide this to my students, if I were to provide this PowerPoint to y'all without having this content, you wouldn't have heard those additional pieces. So how are you going to provide those? Are you going to provide those as notes on the PowerPoint slides? Are you going to create an audio narrated PowerPoint? Are you going to create a video? You know, what are you going to do to provide that additional content to your students? Is it just going to be additional lecture notes? How are you providing some of those additional information? Talking about video, like I mentioned, students are typically not going to just sit down for an hour and watch an hour-long video. So you may want to look at, if you are interested in creating videos, that you look at restructuring how exactly you are going to do a video for your students. Maybe conceptualize it. Instead of doing your hour-long lecture, you cut them down into smaller little segments and really focus on, okay, what is the point that I'm trying to get across right now? What is this kind of piece really meant for? And chunk them into smaller segments, not necessarily make a hour-long section into 4 15-minute videos. That's not what I'm talking about. But how can you restructure what you're talking about into different kind of chunks? This is one thing, if you haven't already seen it, this is one of the other training sessions we're doing is on creating videos. So if you're interested in that, make sure you sign up for it if you haven't already. And then also written documents. Do you have additional written documents that you want your students to maybe have access to? Do you have handouts that you normally give students in class? Is that available to your students in some way? Are you providing that to your students somehow? All right, so we're going to take a look at some example content, just so you can kind of see what are kind of examples of ways online courses look. How do they look to your students? So in this first example, I'm going to talk through kind of how do you find the first assignment. So students are being asked to complete the first assignment. So I'm going to kind of look through this as a student looking for the first assignment. All right, give me just 1 second here. Let me switch over. All right. So you should be seeing my web browser now. So here is my example 1. And so here's a folder. So here's module 1. So as a student, I'd be looking for the first assignment. So I'd be going through here. Okay, here's stuff on chapter 1, some information, stuff on chapter 2, chapter 3, movie review. All right, well, movie review. That kind of sounds like an assignment. Well, okay. Well, there's an assignment. Well, I didn't go into any of the other content. I was just looking for that first assignment. This is actually not the first assignment. This is one of the assignments for this module, but not necessarily the first assignment. So if I look through some of these other areas, there's some different pieces that I could open up, some files and stuff in here. Still haven't found another assignment yet. Physical disabilities. I actually come to just a blank and empty page here. There's nothing even here. As a student, I might go, am I missing something? Maybe the assignment is in here, but it's just not available yet. And then coming into this third one, a case study on cerebral palsy. Oh, well, submit them to the Dropbox. Oh, there's another Dropbox. So maybe this is actually the first assignment. So you can see there's technically 2 assignments here, but it's not real easy necessarily to find that assignment. So there's questions on Emily as one assignment and that movie review. Now, yes, a lot of faculty, a lot of people then say, well, if they had the syllabus, they would know that there were 2 due during this time. Yes, you're right. They probably would, and I'm not providing that information with this. The point was just to look at this to say, well, how easy was it to find that first assignment? So even if I told my students, you have 2 assignments due, how much clicking would a student have to do to find both of those assignments? And are they sure that those are the right assignments? If I have multiple modules open, maybe they might be confused as to which module they're supposed to be doing and different things like that. So now I'm going to show you a second example here. It's the same structure. It's still in a folder that's called a module. And so I'm just going to look at this other way to kind of show a little bit of a more clear navigation for how students proceed through this. So we start by giving objectives and let your students know right up front, what are they supposed to be doing during this? What are they going to be gaining from this? So we go into that module, and then here we have a little bit more information. It's basically the same information as before, it's just kind of restructured. So chapter 1, now I know I need to read the chapter, read the article. It gives me clear definitions of what I'm supposed to be doing. Reading chapter 2, reading chapter 3, and now it tells me right here I'm supposed to complete assignment 1. And then it also tells me there's a movie review, that I'm going to write a review over that movie. It tells me all of that right up front, right on this main page here. And then down below, now it gives me each one of those those pieces for chapter 1 that I was supposed to read, those articles. It gives me a folder to get in to be able to access all the different components for those questions on Emily assignment, that first assignment, but also be able to get into that movie review as well and find that movie review. So all of that kind of became a little bit clearer quite often for students because they're able to see a quick overview of where do I need to go, how do I need to go about doing things. So now I'm going to show you one other example. It's this exact same example, but now I'm going to show you it in a learning module. I like to show both of these because there are different reasons and different preferences for each one of these. It's just a different way of laying out content. Where before you saw each one of those items kind of displayed each on the page from top to bottom, a learning module, on the other hand, it's going to create this navigation pane over on the left side, and then it actually chunks the material into one page at a time. So here's that first area that we saw before. I would click on the next page to take me to the next page. So then it opened up that area. And then if we move on to the next page, and so it just kind of takes me through each thing. Some of them display in line, as you can see by this PDF. Some of them display outwardly. It just kind of goes through each one of these. And so I would go through each page. This is actually a link, so it opened up that link. Notice it gave me a click to launch if that didn't open up. And so it moves through each one of these different components, moves the student through each one of the different components. Like I said, it's all the exact same material. It's essentially laid out the exact same from me as a faculty point of view, but from the student side, it has this table of contents that students can move through and see everything all at a glance. Neither one of these methods is a better way of displaying content. It's just a different way of displaying content. For me, my personal preference, I prefer folders for the most part, but at the same time, there's a lot of times that I like learning modules for different things. It just depends on what my kind of purpose is as to which way I prefer to do some things. We have some faculty that are very adamant that they prefer the learning modules, and some people are adamant they prefer the folders. It's just kind of personal preference. There's not a better way of doing it. It's just making sure that you then verify how are the students seeing things. You want to make sure you don't have an empty page out there. You want to make sure that everything is clear and logical and explains exactly how to get through things. All right, so then moving on, so I have one more kind of example here. And basically what this is it provides a little bit more kind of enhancements to it. It's the exact same information, exact same layout as example 2. It's just a little bit more embellished. So this page looks exactly the same, but whenever you come in, you notice that now we have a banner at the top of this page to start with. So we start with a banner. I want to mention we do have a graphic designer on staff that if you are interested in getting banners for your online courses, let us know. We can get you in contact and he can help you build banners. So some of these things are things that you can easily get done. And without you having to figure out how to do everything. And so you can notice it just kind of visually breaks up things. So chapter 1 has this little folder next to it. Chapter 2 has this little folder. I will disclaimer, because I'm in the faculty preview, these kind of little extra icons appear. It doesn't actually look completely like this. It does look a little bit better from the student side, but I just want to mention that because it's not the full student view of this. Also, these kind of read areas are kind of highlighted, so they kind of make them pop out a little bit more of things that students need to do. And so it just kind of gives a little bit more visual interest to some of these things. So you can see where you can go with an online class. A lot of faculty are really afraid of going to an online class because they say, oh, it's just so boring, it's just all text. Well, you can do a lot of additional things into it. You can add a lot of things. You can add audio and video. You can add in easy, quick little, colorings of things, just depending on what exactly you want in there. So I want to disclaimer this. Whenever you're working on an online class, we recommend starting with trying to aim for that example 2. Work for that example 2. Once you get example 2, that kind of structure, getting the navigation and those features down, then you start looking at adding the embellishments, all the different banners and the tweaks and the things like that to help make it pop a little bit more. Not that you can't do this immediately, but you want to make sure and get a really good clean navigation first and then move into kind of the embellishments. But like I said, we do have a graphic designer on staff, so if you are interested in getting banners for any of your courses, face-to-face or online, we do have somebody that can help build those. And just so you can see the learning modules with this embellished view as well. Again, same structure, just has those kind of banners in there, and it has just kind of a quick through any of this. Sorry, I have a small screen, so that kind of makes things look a little wonky as well. And so you can see kind of how all of that kind of works inside of a course. And so that just kind of gives you some ideas on different ways for examples of how things can work. Now, normally, if we were meeting in person, I would have had you go through each one of these examples so that you could actually touch and feel and see how it would feel as a student to touch each one of these. Unfortunately, that's not really as possible in the online environment, so we're not able to do all of the normal kind of aspects. All right, so let me switch back over here to my PowerPoint. So in looking at that, thinking back to those different kind of aspects of those different examples, how do these examples help students? How did that example 2 and example 3 help students to be able to move through the material? Did it make it easier for students to be able to find what they were trying to do, find what they needed to do, and be able to complete those assignments? Is your course design helping your students to make sure that they're completing everything by not trying to confuse them, but not confusing them in any way? So one way to help with this is to look at creating a course plan from the very start. Now, a lot of people look at course plans and they say this is very daunting and overwhelming. But if you start looking at this and start looking at some of those, it can really help get your course structured nicely. It helps to shape your ideas for your course. What are you trying to get your students to do? What are you trying to get your students to accomplish? It lets you really consider those important design aspects, the organization of it, the pacing, how quickly are students doing things, how often are students having to submit assignments? Are they submitting 5 assignments in 1 week and none the next week? What is the student experience going through that course? It also helps you to really look at your learning objectives and your outcomes and really try to compare those. Are what you are telling your students that they're going to come out with this course being able to know how to do and be able to do, are you really designing assignments that meet those objectives? And then it helps provide a basic roadmap from start to finish for what materials you need to be gathering and creating for your students. So some ideas on creating a course plan. What are the topics that are covered in your class and how are they separated out? Are they separated by chapters? Do you separate them by chapters? Do you separate them by weeks? Do you separate them by units, modules, whatever title you want it to be? How are those topics separated in your class? Do you have a module that then is composed of several chapters? How is that kind of determined? What assessments are then completed by your students? Do they take tests? Do they have assignments or papers? Do they have a group project or multiple group projects? Do they have discussions? What all are you having students actually complete for some type of a grade in some form or fashion? What exactly, when are topics covered, and when are assessments due? So looking at a calendar, and when do those actually cover things? It's not a typical, okay, on Tuesday we're going to cover this, on Thursday we're going to cover this. It becomes more of a, this week we're going to cover this, or over these 2 weeks we're going to cover this. You can create your subunits in different areas besides just weekly coverings. You can change those up by when you have an online class. This is not what you put in your syllabus for the course outline. This is not what this is. Now, a lot of these components are that. You know, what assessments are they doing? What are the topics? When are they due? Those are all things that you do cover in the syllabus, absolutely. But a lot of this is a little bit more detailed than that, because it's how are you breaking the things down? What are those objectives as well that are kind of related to that? So here's an example course plan. And so this has a lot of detail in it. And this is not necessarily something that it's like, okay, this is what I have to do or anything like that. This is just an example of it. So you can see that it has the unit week, kind of what the topic is covering regarding it. It shows what the learning objectives. It also shows what are required material that students must be completing or looking at, and what are additional optional things that they may be looking at. It lets them know what are they actually going to be completing, what assignments and learning activities, and then when exactly are due dates, you know, when are people supposed to be turning things in. And so, like I said, a lot of this is stuff that you would be putting in your syllabus, but a lot of this is a little bit more detailed because it would be giving kind of alignment of how these pieces all kind of flow together. Some people then say, well, should I be giving this to my students? If you want to give it to your students, absolutely. Feel free to give this to your students. There's nothing wrong with it, because you'll have that student that will see this and will see exactly how all of these relate to their course specifically, and they're going to feel more comfortable with completing your assignments because they know this discussion forum has a point to what I'm learning. And so you have that student that really appreciates this course plan because they understand, why am I doing this? I'm a why am I doing this kind of person. I want to know, why am I having to do this? You tell me why I have to do it and I'll do anything for you. But if you don't tell me why, I'm maybe fighting you on some things because I don't understand the purpose behind it. So this course plan can sometimes help those students that need the why is this important to me type of thing. And so, like I said, this is just an example. We do have templates if you need a template for this to help get you started. We do have some templates that we can help you get together to help you structure a course plan. All right, so kind of an overview of what all information could you potentially put on here. And it all just depends on what is your need for your course. So a start date, when is this material going to become available to your students? A due date or a close date. When is something due? When is a module or a week or something going to close to students so that students no longer have access? In fact, whenever we talk about content, I typically recommend having no more than 3 units of material available at any one time. Typically what I say is keep whatever was past due open, the last one that was past due open. That way if a student is running late, needs to complete something a little bit late, that's still available. The one that's currently being worked on right now is available. And then what is due next is available as well. That way, if you have a student that wants to move ahead, they can go ahead and move ahead. Maybe they know they have birthday parties coming up next week, and so they know they're going to be real tight on time next week. Well, if you give it ahead of time, they could go ahead and get it worked on and completed and get a lot of the stuff done this week so that next week they're doing minor changes, and then they're not worrying about coming in with a poorly submitted assignment or coming in last minute saying, I just got overwhelmed and I didn't get it done. They have that ability to move ahead. And so giving that flexibility helps your students in a lot of ways. You can do it whatever way you want. We have some faculty that open all material at once. We have some faculty that open just, the current available material, and whenever it closes, the next one opens. We have some that overlap by a day. So on the due date, you can work one day ahead, but that's about it. And then we have some that open things, by half the semester, everything until the midterms open at once, and then everything after the midterm is open at once. Some people, once it's open, it stays open. Some people, once it closes, it closes. It's completely up to you. You have to gauge your material and your students to know what do they need. Is it something that builds each week, and so they may need to go back to your notes that you did previously? Or is it something that every week is a new concept and they need to forget what was last week and move on, essentially? Not truly forget, but they need to be moving on to the next content and not continually going back to something. It's completely up to you how that is addressed. So what is the module or lesson, unit number, or title for that area? What are the learning objectives? What is the student going to be able to know how to do by the end of that lesson? Again, it's really important. Students need to know why is this important to my class? What am I going to be learning? Lesson topics, if you can identify each one of those topics back to the objectives, that helps make sure that students know why this is important to this class. Description of assessments. So what are they going to be doing? What are they going to be submitting? Again, if you can identify back to that objective, that helps those students that need to know what's going on and why is it happening. You may want to put the grade categories that are from the syllabus. If you do like a weighted grade or you drop things, that way you can kind of keep track of everything. You'd hate to say, oh, there's going to be a whole bunch of quizzes, and then you get to looking at it and then there's only one quiz. And so this can help you gauge that in here and be able to easily then, whenever you get ready to build your grade book, know exactly where everything goes. And then what kind of readings are being assigned? Is it textbook chapters, PowerPoints, external readings? Is it links to different websites? Is it PowerPoints or PDFs? Do you have all of those different components? What are you having them do? Is it optional? Is it required? Knowing all of that kind of information. So we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but I want to kind of come back to it. You can structure your course however you want. You can keep it in the weekly format if you're used to that weekly format and you have weeks 1 through 16. You can transition that to something besides week. You can have it units instead. You could title it modules, and maybe a module composes of several chapters, or maybe a module is just one chapter, kind of a combination of different things. And then also, you can also have what I call the filing cabinet system. where you put all of your lecture materials in one folder, and you have all of your assignments in one folder, and all of your discussions and maybe your group project, and you separate those out by type. Now, for most online courses, I don't recommend this. There are some exceptions, but for the most part, I don't recommend this, because what I call this is the grocery store shopping. I have to go down the lecture materials aisle and find my lecture materials for this week. And then I have to go down the assignments aisle and find my assignments for this week. And then the discussions aisle and find the discussions aisle. Well, wouldn't it be a lot easier if I just went down aisle 1 and found everything that I need for this week in one aisle? It's kind of like going, doing your grocery shopping online. You just show up, they load it up, and you go. And so now you have everything you need for this week in one bag. So I don't, like I said, I don't like this kind of filing cabinet type of system for most online classes, although I have found some classes that the way they have it structured, this does work best. But for most classes, having it sorted out for everything the students are going to need for this lesson area, this informational section, everything they're going to need to be able to look at and complete are all located in the same area. Really helps students to make sure, kind of as a checklist, did I do everything I need to do? Faculty always say, well, if they just looked at their syllabus, even in face-to-face classes, students don't look at their syllabus other than what textbook do I need and I have a problem. Outside of that, they quite often don't go back to that syllabus to find out what do I really have to do this week. So providing it all in one unit helps those students to make sure that they do get everything done without having to take that extra step of going back to the syllabus to find that additional information. So setting up some of those pieces inside a WT class. So setting up your course menu, what are some things to think about? We always recommend try to keep it simple. And this is that course menu that you have on that left menu bar. So we have a default shell that has, the homepage, the syllabus, lessons, resources, those different things. You can customize this, but things you got to think about are how long do you want that to be? Do you want to put 16 weeks in that? Because now that becomes longer. There are some drawbacks. You don't have all of the settings sometimes that you have if you put them inside of like the lessons area. How many clicks are your students having to take? Are they having to take 5 clicks to get to the assignment that they have to do? Or is there a way that you can do it in just 1 or 2 clicks? What is the most important information? I'm kind of looking through that. And that course plan helps to kind of go back to that and look at some of that. All right, so I'm going to take a moment because now I'm going to actually look at now how do you build some of these items into a class and see if there's any questions that anyone has, because I see it popping up that I'm having some chat things going on. So I want to take a minute and just see if we have any questions. Let me see.
Krista, I have a question for the chance.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
And Ryan.
Hey, so when I've taught online classes before, I realized I did the combination approach where I had lecture folder, then a week 1, lecture folder, then assignments folder, then discussion.
Yes.
And the reason I did that is because, they have an assignment that they might get in like week 1. I might tell them about it, but it's not due until, week 6. So if I were to have the assignment in week 1, that would maybe be misleading or something. So that's why I had it sort of separated from the weekly schedule. That's sort of the rationale for why I did it, but you recommended not using that approach.
So if you do have things like, and that was one of the reasons why I said sometimes there are very, very valid reasons for having this. Okay. So having an assignment that, you have a midterm paper that they're working on for the first 6 weeks of class, that, you want that to be available for 6 weeks. But one of the things that is important then is in each one of those weeks, are you referencing, you need to be working on assignment, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
And so referencing it back then at least provides that material in a one-stop shop area for what all do I need to do.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't like not thinking of something,
Nope.
so thank you.
Nope. Yeah. When you have things that work over multiple areas, multiple weeks, or, units of material, that's when you start looking at, okay, maybe it is better to have an assignments area.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Any other questions? All right. Oops. All right. So let me go back here. I'll pull up just an empty course here. All right. So a lot of people then, they're not quite sure how to build different things. So I just want to kind of go over a little bit of some of the the simple things, some of the common settings for a lot of these different things. So we have inside of any area that you can add content, we have a build content area. This is basically content that your students can view. This is viewable content. Assessments is then gradable items. And we have workshops over how do you build a test, how do you build an assignment, how do you build these different things. And so those are in a different session, so I'm not going to talk about any of those. So I'm really focusing on building content. So the main things that most people use are going to be the item. This is going to be where you just post text on the page, basically. A file. This is where you then can upload document, a Word document, PDF, PowerPoint, whatever. You can upload a document for students to download. We have these audio, image, and video options. I don't really recommend using these for the most part. Image is okay, but quite often when you have an image, even when you have an image, you're going to you want to add additional text or something to it. And this isn't going to be like for your banners and stuff like that. So for the most part, these are not the options you want. For audio and video, if you are looking to make audio and video and put into your classes, we actually recommend you using Ensemble Video for it. You have to have an account that we can set up for you so that you can add stuff into it, and you can then link it into your course. That's what this Ensemble Video Chooser option is down here. But basically why we recommend doing it through that and not through these is that when you add any of these, if you copy that course into another section, now that file is duplicated in our system 2 times. So if you teach 3 sections of the same course, that video that you've uploaded into one course is now in the system 3 times, taking up 3 times the space. Where if you put it in Ensemble Video, you put it in there 1 time, you link to all 3 of your classes, and now it's only taking up space 1 time on our system, on our server. So we recommend, instead of using these, using other means to be able to put it in your class. And we can always talk to you about what's the best way depending on what you're trying to do for different things. WebLink then, of course, allows you to add a link to, the CNN website or to, Yahoo News or something if you have, any of those websites you might want to add. Then learning module, that's where I had talked about. So there's learning module and content folder. Those are the 2 main ways to be able to structure class into grouped items, grouped areas. I also want to mention below content folder is a module page. This does not go with learning module. Module page is actually what that homepage is. If you remember, whenever you come into the homepage, this is actually a module page. It's placing all of these different modules onto a page. And they're preset in the system, so it's not really anything that you're going to necessarily do very often. So I just like to point that out because people like to add in module pages thinking that's what goes with learning modules, and they don't. So then we have some other items in here I'm not really going to talk about, but I just like to mention that those are kind of the main things. So anytime you add any of these items, you're going to have a name area, you're going to have some text area that you can add in additional details for. Depending on what exactly it is, you may have an attachment kind of option that you can add things into. And then at the bottom of every one of these items, we have these 3 options. Permit users to view this content, yes or no. This is, do students have access to view this? This is essentially like the power to the building in some cases, because what this does is it allows it to be available for students. Then, so I'm going to skip this track and come down to this display after until. If you want to make something magically open or magically close, you can set up dates to have it magically appear at a certain time, so that if you want to make sure that your module, your lesson appears at 8 a.m. on Monday morning, you don't have to make sure that you're sitting there at 8 a.m. to turn it on. You can make it just automatically appear at 8 a.m. But the display after and display until, those are basically the power, the light switches in the room. Well, if the power to the building is turned off, the light switch in the room is not going to work. And so you have to remember that if you want to display it by dates, you have to set it to make this available to view. If you have it set to no, it ignores this because, like I said, the power to the building is off. So the room is not going to turn on. And then also with that, you have the option to track the number of views. Basically, this gives you an additional tracking mechanism on this specific item to be able to see who all has accessed it. It's not something we recommend a lot because there are some other tracking ways, but if you have a really important document or really important information area and you want to be able to track to see how many people and who has actually looked at it and accessed it, you can track that. It's always important to note, just because they clicked on it doesn't mean they actually looked at it and read it. But of course, if they didn't even click on it, how could they have possibly read it in some ways? So those are kind of the three main standard options for basically anything you add. So I just like to point those out, that you do have those different options when adding, like I said, just about everything. We do recommend using folders or learning modules for structuring your content and not just dumping everything in here, because otherwise you get to a really long menu in here and students are having to hunt through everything. Or even if you're only making available what they currently need, now you are hunting through everything to be able to find stuff. So sorry, I saw a chat message come in.
Chris, there's just a few quick questions for clarification on learning module. What's the major differences between that and content folders?
So the major difference between between content folders and learning modules is how it's displayed to students. So let me see here. It's not. Okay. Let me go back over to my examples here. So this is a folder. So a student goes into a folder and they see each one of these items on a page, and it moves down the page. They have additional folders that can be inside of that. Where a learning module, when a student goes in, they see the table of contents and they only see one page of each one of these at one time. So I'm going to turn edit mode off or on. So now you can see it. What does this faculty look like? So when you look at this as a faculty, this looks almost identical to what it looked like in the course folder, in a content folder. You have each one of these items all on one page, but from the student perspective, they see each one of these items as its own separate page. It helps with that. It's supposed to help with that cognitive load, the chunking theory, that you only see a certain amount of material at one particular time, and you're not overwhelmed. And just by moving to the next page, it causes a visual break in your brain, basically. And so then it resets it a little bit so that you're not quite so overwhelmed with so much material all on one page. Does that make sense? And so
I think that helped.
You think that helped?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me come back up here. So this learning module, that is what this is. And by adding a learning module, so when you go to learning module, it's going to create this start that basically looks a lot like what you've seen on the other things we were looking at. It has a few additional settings available. Do you want to force them to go through each page? kind of thing. Do you want to show the table of contents? But other than that, it looks exactly like a content folder whenever you're creating it. So you can see name, the text, and then those 3 settings. Like I said, the main difference is how does it display to your students? That's the main difference, is what are students seeing. All right. Okay, so continuing on. So I kind of talked about all those different kind of items. A lot of them are pretty self-explanatory or give pretty good explanations as to what exactly is needed for each one of those things. So like I mentioned, building different assessments. So if you're interested in how do you build an assignment, a test, a discussion, we have trainings on each one of those. Make sure you come to them. We're going to try to walk you through essentially the best practices and all the different options that you need to be able to create each one of these different things. So be sure to attend those if you're interested in any or all of them. We also have then a session also on videos, on creating videos as well, if you're interested in that one. I will send after this, I'll send out a survey link, kind of give some feedback on this session, but I'll also include the sign up link for signing up for these additional ones. And on top of that, I don't know if I have it here. Oh, no, not yet. We're also, if you need any help with creating a course plan, looking through, moving your course online, we'll also be doing one-on-one sessions. If you're interested, you can sign up for one-on-one sessions to be able to get some help with an instructional designer for how do I actually do this type of thing. So the other thing that I want to talk about is communicating with your students and different ways that you can communicate. Quite often, it's kind of a lot of faculty are confused with the different ways that you can communicate with your students. So let me come back over here. So inside of every course, you have different ways to communicate. Of course, you always, inside the home page, you do have this announcements area. I like to point out in this area, it's only going to show what has been posted in the last 7 days. So you have to go to more announcements to see more, to see anything that's past 7 days old. Same thing with your students, but this is one way that you can create a quick way to be able to send information out to all of your students at one time. And it also still be posted inside of the class so that students can come in and see it as well. So that is one way to create material for your students, create some information to your students, communications between them. And then you also have send email and course messages. By default, both of these are made available to you and your students in every course. And why that is because we want you as the faculty member to decide which way you prefer to use. When we piloted Blackboard, as well as quite often periodically, we've done surveys to see which method faculty prefer. Do they prefer send email? Do they prefer course messages? And we've always come almost straight right down the middle, 50-50, each one, adamant that their side is the right side. So we've left it open so that you can choose which way you want to communicate with your students. The important thing is to understand the differences. So send email is basically a push through from Blackboard to be able to get student email addresses. But after you send it, there is no inbox, there is no sent box inside a WT class. It is all contained in your email, in your WT email, in your students at Buff's email. It is now all contained in that email. You get a copy of everything you send. So we do recommend you keeping that because that's the only record of what was sent. But you then have to respond to anything as well in your email. Course messages, on the other hand, actually has an inbox and a sent box. So you can actually see what was sent, what was received, and all of that within WT Class. The downside to course messages is you do have to come back to WT Class to be able to view and respond to it, where send email does pop up in your email. So if you have it connected to your phone, to your iPad, to your other device, you can more easily access it and respond to it. My boss prefers email. Because, Laura Hossel, she prefers email because she wants to be able to answer that right from her phone. Whenever she gets it, she wants to be able to respond to it right then and there. I don't want it in my email. I want it to be in course messages because I want it to be in the class. I want to be able to know exactly who sent it, when they sent it, all of that from within the class. I get so many emails, I'll miss it. I'll forget about it if I get that email to my email sometimes, where if I get the notification, it reminds me, oh, hey, I need to go check it. And then I go and respond to all of my messages at one time if I need to. And so I prefer course messages. It's completely up to you which way you want to do it. But we do recommend turning one off so that students know exactly how to communicate as well. Quite often we get students who contact us saying, well, I've contacted my professor and they haven't gotten back to me. Well, they send using send email and they're looking for the response in the inbox in course messages and they're never checking their student email. Well, if you had one of these ways turned off, they would either see it because it's in course messages, or they would start to look and say, well, where's my inbox for my send email? And eventually they're going to get around to, well, email, maybe I should go check my email. So we recommend turning one of them off. And you can do that by clicking on the drop-down menu to the right of either one of those items and just selecting that hide link option. That will allow you to then be able to essentially turn it off. And so when you click hide link, you notice it'll give that little gray box next to the title. And so now it becomes unavailable to students. I can still see it, so if I need to get into it for some reason, I can, but now my students no longer have access to do this. Now they're forced to use, in this case, course messages. And so, like I said, the main thing is understanding what is the difference between those. And we always recommend turning one of them off. You can always change it, just go back to that, click show link, and it turns it back on. Just making sure that your students know how to communicate with you. It is something you have to do to every course, every semester. It's one of those things that doesn't often copy between courses, unfortunately. So it is something you have to remember to do each semester. All right, so finishing up, so kind of like some of the things I already mentioned, if you need help, if you looked at that course plan and said, oh my gosh, that is just so much information, how am I even going to think through this? We want to know, we do have ways that we can help. So we do have a course template that will help you with a lot of the course navigation, best practices for things that information students may need inside of an online course, some of those things. We do have a template. That is one of the other sessions that we're offering this week. So we highly recommend you getting involved in that if you haven't already, and coming to that training session. We have additional trainings, like I said, assignments, tests, discussions, videos. We have those additional trainings on how to do different things. And then we also are offering one-on-ones if you need help with a little bit more specific, I need help with this course. We can help walk you through different things, best practices, what might be the best way to set up things, how do you move that face-to-face course online, what do you want to do? We can walk you through those things. So like I said, I'm going to send out an email after the session this afternoon sometime with the sign-up sheet for one-on-ones. You can always contact us anytime you want. If you want to reach out to a specific person, feel free to do that. There's lots of us that are available. Any one of us are available to try to help you if we can, with whatever way we can. So we want to make sure that you get the help that you need. We don't want to just leave you in the dark here. So we want to make sure you get help. And I think that is all that I have for y'all. I think I got done early. Yes, I got done early. 6 minutes. Woohoo. It was no technical issues this time. My computer crashed on me last time, so we're doing really good this time. So if anyone has any questions, please let me know. I'll stick around here for a couple other minutes, a couple last minutes. But otherwise, that was all that I had for y'all today. I want to thank everyone for coming. And like I said, if you have any questions, please let us know. Please contact us. I'll send out an email later on today with some additional stuff, those additional links and stuff for you as well.